Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir Podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson.
And I'm David Bernheisel.
Let's jump into the news. So as of this recording, ElixirConf is 2 days away, and we've been scouring the socials, looking for all the good stuff that we could share, and I think everyone's holding it back. They're all holding it back for their ElixirConf talks because we're just not seeing a ton.
That's so there is something that came across my my feed, which I can really appreciate. There is a new library out there. It's very fresh, but it seems usable right now. I haven't yet used it myself, but hey, the screenshots look great. The README looks great. It's a new library called Lotus and companion library called LotusWeb. So what is Lotus? What is this doing for you? So here's a little bit off of their README. It says Lotus is a lightweight SQL query runner and storage library for Elixir applications with Ecto. So that's the point here. So you kind of create these queries that are reusable, not in an application development sense, but in a business intelligence sense. So that's probably more so the usage here, right? So I've just got this query that I need to be able to run over and over again. And there's parts of this query that are variables that I want to be able to replace ad hoc. Lotus by itself is probably not what you're going to use on its own. You're almost, in my viewpoint, how I would always use it, I would always use this with LotusWeb as well. And what LotusWeb is the web portion of this that is going to display all of those saved queries that you have. These saved queries are stored in the database. How meta, right? Just the queries, not the results. And LotusWeb would pull those queries up, show you, a list of all these queries that you've saved, has introspection on those kinds of variables, what those types are, gives you a UI for popping in your values. Basically kind of gives you a little database client right then and there for your repo. I can really imagine this being very helpful for those ad hoc, back office admin only, kind of UI, where I just need to run these little old SQL queries on just ad hoc, so I can provide or answer some questions that's, somebody might be asking, like, how many views did we have today on this little record over here or something, right? So I don't have an existing UI for that. I'll just do a quick little database query. So I could really imagine Lotus being, hooked up with a read-only replica, of your database, and then having a bunch of these queries saved for reusability, share it with your team. And that read-only replica would be, read-only. So hopefully you wouldn't have any risk of totally destroying stuff because you forgot that where clause in your delete statements.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting, some of the other examples we see of this kind of thing. Some of the ones that we were thinking of are a lot of those back office things that give you business intelligence insights into your database, your whole system. One of them, it's a free open source one, is Metabase. You can self-host it. It's a BI system. I've used that and I enjoyed that. But it's the kind of thing where you can define those, you're building custom dashboards and the data behind this particular thing is a query and you might customize that query and you're saving that query. And that's the kind of stuff we're talking about doing. I can think of other examples of how I might do this. I might do this through like a live book. You might have some of those common BI systems and setups, and then you still have the variable replacements, of like, this is the date range or this is whatever. And you could do that through a live book. But this lets you build it more directly into your app, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. So Lotus doesn't seem to be hooking up with the Ecto schemas where it's like decoding into your structs and all. So these are much more just like regular old SQL queries. And your SQL queries in LotusWeb would be shown in typical table views, right? So this isn't meant for typical, application querying, like you would with normal Ecto queries. This is much more with that, like, the only place I can think I can slot it is for like business intelligence, but I'm sure there are other use cases here.
On the LotusWeb GitHub project, it says it's a lightweight alternative to complex BI tools. So like that's, I think, what they have in mind for it.
So they know what they're about. Yeah. Okay. Since this is really our only news item of the day, I'll go into some of the current features that they have, right? So they do have like enhanced, this is quoting them from their README. So they have enhanced security with read-only execution. I guess that's assuming that you're giving it a read-only repo just to be double sure. I don't know. And table visit. Oh, and I guess it's because I don't know what stops you from just putting a delete statement in there.
You could put a read-only user. It would be the database user that's accessing it. I don't know.
That's okay. That's one way. I think this works through your Ecto repo though. So whatever that's configured to use. You can configure it to have multi-database support. So you can have it like point to several like Ecto repos. And so those Ecto repos, if you've got multiple configured, one to Postgres, one to SQLite, one that's a read-only replica, it doesn't matter. It's just a config, right? And so you can plug all that into Lotus, and the web UI will give you options for selecting the one that you want to execute on. You still have like type safe results with structured querying, probably on the backs of all of the typical database adapters underneath the covers in Ecto repo. Here's what they don't have. They don't have query versioning or change tracking. They don't have query result caching. Okay. Ecto does at some level, so I'm not sure what this is quite. Maybe it puts in a prepare unnamed everywhere. I'm not sure. What they don't have is export functionality. I'm presuming from the web nor the non-web one. That's a pretty typical feature for these BI tools. Is like, okay, I did my query. Now I need to go throw it into Excel, and so they would download a CSV and then start dealing with it. That's not quite there yet. I think that's probably like another baseline feature. If they got that in there, that would be superb. That would take it to the next good level, like usability level here. They don't have MySQL support. So the 10% out there of you that are using MySQL.
Hey, I've used MySQL with Elixir too.
Of the Elixir crowd, I think I remember the stat being like 10% of them is not Postgres. I could be wrong. Let's see. Column level visibility and access control. So, okay, there's lots of ACLs that could go into this. I could totally see that. And then query templating with parameter substitution using like double must-add, handlebar placeholders. So that's probably another good baseline feature. So when that export thing gets in there and the parameter substitution gets in there, that's probably pretty killer of a product at that point. It's like where you can actually like consider this to replace maybe something else that you're using like Metabase or look, Snowflake and those other BI tools. They're kind of a different class, right? Like they're like more data lakes, much more optimized. Things like that, across database joins. There's a lot of stuff that they can do. This isn't meant for that, I don't think, right? This is for everyone else. Probably the other 80%, like the other 80% of the apps out there is like, I just have a database, man. That's all I got. This is perfect for that. Once a couple of these features drop, I can really see Lotus and LotusWeb being like, in my opinion, a default install. You're going to have Phoenix Live View or Phoenix dashboard. You're going to have Open and Open Web in there. And then I'm probably going to have Lotus and LotusWeb in there too. Like those are my three like default dashboard installs, And
I thought it was interesting because they reference a Ruby gem called Blazor as an inspiration for this. And just looking up Blazor, they describe it as a battle-tested thing that's been used at Instacart.
Ah, okay.
It makes sense. It's like I got a bunch of data and I want to be able to create these complex queries because lots of times these queries are like the multi-level joins, unions, and you've got date ranges and stuff like that. And so being able to do that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Blazor is, I've never met him. He's one of my heroes, but Andrew Kane over there in the Ruby world. A little background on this fella. Him, among other contributors, helped create the Strong Migrations. I forget what it's called. Strong Migrations Guide for Ruby and Active Record. And I adapted their guide for Ecto and made it specific to Ecto and added a couple more notes and scenarios and that's called Safe Ecto Migrations. So Andrew Kane, perfect fella for dealing with something like this. So Blazor is definitely good pedigree and heritage for Lotus to be, inspired by. So this is all good. Well, that's it. I enjoy talking about Lotus and LotusWeb, but as of this recording, we're 2 days away from ElixirConf, so I know by the time this releases, all the talks have happened by the time. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be heads down, like just live streaming. I won't be there in person, but I'll be live streaming all these things. I'm really excited about ElixirConf. So I hope everyone that is there and by the time hears this had a good time and did not, be a wallflower. They got out and socialized, met some new folks, maybe got that new cool job or lead on that cool job, good networking space, and that they just come out the other side of ElixirConf, super inspired and looking forward to their next year and their career with Elixir.
Well, that's all we have for the news. This episode is sponsored by Paraxial.io, the only security platform with true Elixir support. I sat down with founder Michael Lubis to ask some questions about how Elixir developers should think about security. Welcome back, Michael.
Thank you.
Here's this week's question. How can Paraxial services help me when I'm dealing with certifications like HIPAA and SOC 2? I've heard you mention a couple times, and something I'd like to understand better.
So these certifications are very common, especially when you have a startup that's selling into enterprise markets or dealing with medical information. The biggest thing Paraxial does is continuously running security checks, such as static code analysis, dependency security, monitoring for brute force login attempts. These are things that you need to fulfill those certifications. And then, for example, in a SOC 2 Type 2 audit, you need to provide evidence that that control has been implemented for the past 6 months. So rather than on audit day, you're kind of crossing your fingers that Soblo actually has been running for the past 6 months, you can just present the Paraxial.io report showing the last 6 months of scans, and hopefully that you have had 0 vulnerabilities during recent scans and you're not deploying any into production.
Today, we're being joined by our special guest, Mateusz Front. Mateusz, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad we could have you come because we've been talking about popcorn for a while, just in the news and all the cool stuff that's been happening with popcorn. And what that is, just as a little teaser in case you don't remember, dear listener, basically putting Elixir into WebAssembly so it's running in the browser. So you got an Elixir runtime in the browser. Very cool stuff. I'm really looking forward to understanding more about how this came to be, how this works, and what ideas you guys have planned for this, because this is kind of a little bit mind-blowing, but it's really fun. But before we get into all of that, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. Like, where do you live and what kind of work are you doing?
So I live in Kraków, Poland. I'm a software engineer at Software Mansion. I've been mostly doing multimedia stuff, so I contributed a lot to Membrane. And recently I'm more focused on Popcorn.
Awesome. How long have you been doing Elixir?
So I started working with Elixir at Software Mansion. It was about 9 years ago.
Okay. So yeah, you've been doing Elixir for a long time. Nice.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you work at Software Mansion, and you also mentioned Membrane. So we got to talk a little bit about what Software Mansion's been doing, because it's been a lot. Like, you guys seem to be very busy with a lot of creative stuff. For instance, that we've talked about recently is the live debugger, which, you can stick into your local running machine and it shows up in live view, and you can debug your live views locally with a live view. It's very cool. It's very meta. Love it. And then there's Membrane. It's that really impressive advanced multimedia framework. There's a lot of obvious benefits for that product. And then there's Popcorn. So I can see some really interesting opportunities with Popcorn for education. One thing is it lets people try out Elixir and kind of get familiar with the syntax without even installing anything, right? Just going to a website. But I'm really interested to learn more about why Software Mansion thought that Popcorn is something interesting that they want to invest time into creating and maintaining. So maybe you can give us a little intro, like, what is Popcorn?
Like you said it pretty accurately. So Popcorn allows you to run Elixir in the browser without installing anything. So it relies heavily on AtomVM. I always say that because AtomVM is very core to all this. Basically, the way it works is that we compile AtomVM to WebAssembly via mscripten, and then we put that in the browser. We put compiled Elixir code in the browser. We use the AtomVM to run the Elixir code. So basically, that's how it works.
Simple enough.
Yeah, just stick it in. AtomVM runs in the browser. Sure,
a couple of flags here and there. Bing, bang, boom.
Actually, one of the goals of Popcorn is to make it easy for the user to try, because AtomVM compiles to very different targets to all IoT devices, and there is quite some amount of complexity. It supports Erlang. It's mainly an Erlang, focused on Erlang, I would say. Like most of the code they have is in Erlang. So we wanted to make it very easy to use with Elixir, with a few steps in when you follow them. They are in README. You can have like some Elixir running in the browser. So that's one of the goals.
That's cool. So you said that's one of the goals, is to make it easy to try out Elixir. One of the other demos on the website is showing not just that I can run an Elixir interpreter and type in Elixir code, but that it actually is executing an Elixir application. And the one that was demoed is the Conway's Game of Life, right? It's like a little simulation. That's another aspect to it where it is executing an Elixir application in the browser. So I'd love to hear a little bit more. Maybe what is your idea or the how it makes sense for Software Mansion to say, we want to explore this, and what do you have in mind for that?
There are no clear, obvious benefits for Software Mansion exactly from having these particular projects working. Like the reason why we started with this is to push the community forward, to push the ecosystem forward, to increase both the possibilities of what you can do with Elixir and all the hype and marketing around Elixir to make it more popular, more visible, and to make Software Mansion more visible as well, of course, so that we can have growing popularity of the language and more use cases, so that people come to Software Mansion and work with us. But we, of course, we have ideas of where this can go further, apart from educational purposes, which are the first goal, I would say. There are also more complex applications where we can use that. For example, we can try running some Elixir code in real-world web apps, either in live view to limit the networking part. When there is a bottleneck, for example, when it becomes a bottleneck, or we can try running local first software, which becomes more and more popular now, or we can provide a better runtime for use cases that are already there, like Glim, for example, or Hologram. There are quite some opportunities. In general, having the same language in both backend and frontend is very valuable. It also has challenges, of course, but if we have this opportunity with Elixir, I believe it could really improve the adoption, increase the amount of use cases. And we made this decision with José, basically, with cooperation with him. So I would say his opinion on that matter would be also very important. Just ask him to just get this information from him, because I don't want to speak for him.
We talked about recent blog post on Elixir Lang website that was naming all the different ways that Elixir can integrate and work with other ecosystems, other languages, other runtimes. And AtomVM and Popcorn were mentioned. It feels like there's some official blessing for it. It's not an official project by any means, but it's hey, this is really cool, and we think people should know about this. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about AtomVM. It's not a project that you created. I'd love to learn a little bit more about how AtomVM fits into this, and any background you can share on that project too.
AtomVM is created by Davide Betio, but there are also other contributors. Paul Gio, I hope I pronounced it properly, in particular is very, very active, and this project is quite active. We started contributing to AtomVM as well because it's the actual engine that runs this Elixir code. We thought maybe we can just use AtomVM, throw some Elixir code on it, and it will work. Unfortunately, it didn't work. We're still not at the point it all works, and we're still not at the point it's stable enough so that we are satisfied. But we're having quite good progress, just taking the perspective of running Elixir code and supporting all the syntax features, all the OTP features, most importantly. So that's that's basically the most of our work currently to make it compatible. Like AtomVM is very interesting project because it's a whole virtual machine, but quite simple as for a virtual machine. So it's a very good learning resource to see how the virtual machine works. I learned also a lot about how the BIM works, because like the concepts are very similar. Unfortunately, like it doesn't have all the features that BIM has, so we are working to fill that gap.
Maybe you can help clarify something for me, because so AtomVM, it has many, you mentioned compilation targets, and one of those is WebAssembly. So that's a target. It has its own set of constraints. If I remember right from some previous discussions when we were talking about targeting WebAssembly, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think you can't run parallel processes, but you can do concurrency where, one thing is running at a time, but you can switch between them, but you can't have multiple things running simultaneously, because that would be a limitation for the kind of Elixir code that I'm running. Do I have that right?
You're right that it would definitely be a limitation. Fortunately, it's not. We can have real parallelism within the browser via WebAssembly. Basically, like I'm not expert on that part, but in general, that there is C code or any code, and there is the WebAssembly, which is a bytecode, and there is a compilation, and there is a POSIX or C standard library that you have to somehow port so that it works on the browser, because the browser doesn't have the syscalls. So you have to map the syscalls from POSIX to the browser APIs. And there are basically two ways or two projects that do that. One is Emscripten and the other is WASI. The WASI is a standard, so it's documented. It's developed quite slowly, I would say. There are many implementations of that standard. Emscripten is just implementation. So the approach of WASI is that let's think carefully how we want to do that, which features are worthwhile, which are not, and let's make the API as good as possible and stable from the start. The Emscripten approach, from my point of view, is just let's support everything as fast as we can. So that's why WASI is being developed quite slowly. The changes are quite slow. Like 4 years, there are some missing features because I think the guys just want to make it perfect. Emscripten, on the other hand, has many features that are necessary, for example, to feasibly run Elixir. There are other complexities there related to how fast it's being developed. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, that actually is very helpful. It's really interesting and cool that it's more capable than I even thought, maybe in part because of all the work that's being done by these other libraries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Emscripten just maps pthreads from POSIX to web workers of the browser. And to my knowledge, web workers are very well parallel, so they can run in parallel, they can execute the code in parallel. Like support for WASI would be also very worthwhile, because there are WASI runtimes that don't require you to run the whole browser. So you can just run WebAssembly in a quite lightweight sandbox environment. And supporting that would mean we can run Elixir in a lightweight sandbox environment, which would be also very, very useful, I think, because like sandboxing is quite a feature to have. So even if we couldn't have a real parallelism, it would be useful in some use cases, I believe. So that's an area that we also would like to explore, but we don't have time for that right now.
So I was thinking about Popcorn. I was thinking about how I could use it. I'm a typical web dev guy, right? So where is this nice new awesome tool? Where could I use it, right? How does it fit in my tool belt? And I don't understand enough about WebAssembly, the internals. I don't understand enough about any other language that can possibly, transpile into it, enabling me to do something cool in the browser. But here's like the general, sense that I get, right? It's like there are systems, a variety of languages. We don't really need to care, I guess, but let's just say systems level programming like C or Rust and stuff like that, Zig, that can be transpiled into or recompiled, whatever it is, targeted for WebAssembly that can then run in the browser. What I can do in the browser then is kind of up to me as a bridge from that other language to things that are happening in the browser. One of the first places I go to is just heavy processing. Mm-hmm. And heavy processing is going to be of any kind of file. And the first thing I typically think of there, especially when it comes to the browser, is like, what do people use the browser for? Going to youtube.com, right? Going to, easygif.com to convert their videos into something memeable and shareable, right? While those are probably lightweight in comparison, I'm thinking about media processing. That's the gist of it, right? So media processing with existing tools written in other languages, but now enabled for inside the browser. So that's one direction. Another direction is just like what WebAssembly can do for the DOM, right? So we're thinking about typical frameworks like React and Vue, and in our case, LiveView. The last I checked with WebAssembly, how that works with the DOM is it's fairly limited. That's still not a great use case for WebAssembly. So from your perspective, like where are some good directions? How can I use this? What would Popcorn be? When would I choose Popcorn as a typical web dev guy to help me out with some problems?
I will get back to this idea of having same language on the front end and back end. I think that's one aspect that makes JavaScript popular, for example, that you can like have a single stack. Like if we can have like kind of a single stack in Elixir, then it's an advantage by itself. So like the WebAssembly having problems or being limited for DOM manipulation is a concern, of course, but I think we can overcome that for that higher purpose. Like, for example, we can have a little bit more declarative approach so that instead of like doing each one DOM change as a request from WebAssembly to JavaScript, then do the DOM change, then get the response, we can have a batching for that. We can have business logic implemented in Elixir, and then frameworks for like DOM manipulation that do that in a more clever way than just doing requests to JS. Also, this area is quite evolving, so I would say that it would only get better. I think like these are, of course, there are some challenges to overcome, but definitely I wouldn't say that general front end with Elixir is not possible or won't be possible in a reasonable future. So that's kind of an area to explore for sure.
Yeah, when I was just doing some research on what is the current state of WebAssembly today, if I can run Elixir in a WebAssembly, that's awesome. What can I do with WebAssembly? And David, you totally nailed the big one. I think that a lot of people turn to it for, which is performance. And when I think of what kinds of things I might want to do, like maybe I could do something like a user wants to process a file. Maybe they have a local file and they want to process that before sending it up. You could offload a lot of that work to be run locally in their browser and then send up the data that way. That's one idea. A lot of the bigger use cases seem to be around things like video or audio editors, really big kind of processing. One I was really surprised to see is that you can actually do machine learning inference. Because WebAssembly has access to the GPU, if the GPU on the user's browser in their machine is capable, then you can actually run inference, like small models could be downloaded and available and executed locally. So that's really interesting. I think we all agree that the browser has kind of become the operating system for most people. That's what a Chromebook is, basically. And when you talk about what do people use the web for, maybe it's I open up YouTube, I go to my email, everything is in the browser. So having the ability to do more performance-focused things in the browser through WebAssembly, then that becomes really interesting. Another one I thought was interesting was you're able to port legacy apps like C and C++ apps. And Audacity is an audio recording and editing tool. And like that is listed as one of the things that can be ported to WebAssembly. Interesting stuff, right? There's a lot of interesting ideas of where you could take a WebAssembly application. And now the idea of being able to write that code in Elixir to do whatever I want to do, that becomes more interesting. That's getting back to your benefits of talking about the same language on the server as the client. I don't have to become a master of multiple languages to be proficient.
Also, you can just take your, for example, NX model and then implementation use case, whatever, and just transfer it to the front end. That's, I think, quite a cool vision.
I don't know why my twisted mind went straight to Silicon Valley, where they have distributed compression across everyone's browsers, everyone's phones. Okay, I'm trying to think through the stack here. So you write it in Elixir, gets executed natively on GPUs, typically your GPU, right? Like you, the one running on the app. But in this case, it's natively compiled code, so it's by code in some way that gets packaged up into WASM, and WASM then executes in the browser's sandbox. I'm sure there's a link here, there's a bridge here that needs to be more intentional, but that WASM would have to be that compiled code for the for NX to access the GPU would have to be able to target WASM maybe for that to work to get access to the GPU on the browser. Anyway, I'm just trying to compute here what's going on because also fresh in my mind is like all of the interop stuff that Elixir has. How is that going to target something like WASM as well? It's like you have to also coordinate all of those all those things to target WASM as well. It's like we're typically not even like talking about just native Erlang code. We're talking about all of its NIFs too, and that's it gets much more complex, I guess, right? What an undertaking that would be, right? What an undertaking for that to just work.
Yeah,
it's like it seems very, very complex, but I can give an example of another project that we do in Software Mention that is called Smelter. It's like media server that's about composing videos. So you have multiple inputs, you compose them, for example, to look like in a grid or any other way, and then it outputs a single or multiple streams. So it's a kind of a server-side tool, but because it's written in Rust, Rust is quite good for compiling to WebAssembly. Folks just put that in the browser and made a demo of this. And when you visit like smelter.com, I guess, you can just use Smelter in the browser. And it wasn't like straight away, of course, but it also uses GPU. Like it's all about composing media on GPU. It's a complex project, and it required using some browser APIs instead of like other libraries or APIs. But like it was a very reasonable amount of effort to just transfer it to the browser, even though it's so complex. So I would say that we can already run models in the browser. So if we like have a backend for NX to work with these APIs that are in the browser, that's nothing stops us from just having NX in the browser. So if we could have like, maybe we won't have like that kind of interoperability, so we just can take any Elixir project and just throw that into the browser and it will magically work. But decent kind of interoperability, I think, is possible, and it's not as hard as we may imagine.
Yeah, and that's smelter.dev. We got a link for that in the show notes. When I think of what you guys have built with saying, hey, here's AtomVM, this is really cool. What's it going to take to make it so we can run this in the browser? That's what Popcorn is. It's like some changes to AtomVM, then Popcorn is like the packaging, as I understand it, for making that a deliverable to a browser. I almost get the feel like what you're done is you said, this is really cool. We think this is neat. This is a new toy or a new tool. We just want to share it because we want to see what cool things people might want to do with this. And I appreciate that, right? It's just like, here's something cool, play with it and share what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I really hope that people will start using it. Or people already are starting using it. Unfortunately, they face problems quite quickly because we still don't support all the Elixir features out there. Try to keep increasing the support. But once this becomes stable, which I hope is going to be very soon, I really hope that more and more folks will try to experiment with this and give us feedback, which will be very valuable.
Great. Yeah. So it sounds like it's ready for people to play with. Don't expect it to be 100% smooth right now. You're still growing, right? It's still a work in progress. But what is next for you and what is next for the Popcorn project? Anything you can share?
Now we are focusing on several different aspects, and one of them is contributing more to the AtomVM because we did some hacks in our fork, and now we need to straighten this all and contribute back. So this is an endeavor on its own. Another thing is Elixir language tour. We'd like to provide a language tour for Elixir similar to what, for example, Go has and other languages too, so that you have an interactive tutorial, something like getting started with Elixir, but very interactive, that you can run in the browser to learn Elixir, basically. Another thing is experimenting with a live view and seeing what like improvements we can give to live view to have live views working on the browser side entirely. Yes, so these are the main things that we are working on currently.
That sounds pretty cool. And by cool, I mean that's an understatement. Like that's huge. I can't even imagine like where to go, from there.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think what you're saying with that live view, and I want to make sure I get this right, is like that I have a Phoenix live view and I want to run a WebAssembly Popcorn instance in there. How can I make them work together?
That's a good question. That's what we are actually currently exploring. So I don't have anything interesting to say so far.
Live client.
Because like you think about that, like with a live view, I can push events, right? Or I can push from the client, like the JavaScript, a hook or something like that. I can push to the live view. But if it's a target that's hitting WebAssembly that's running, I can just start thinking of really fun games and stuff like that.
Yeah. The naming's going to be very important there. Yeah, because we already have like JS commands, right? And then there's the hooks. And so like JS commands are going to feel, they're all executed browser side, right? In JavaScript. Like from the server's perspective, it's going to feel like a JS command, but it's not a JS command. Like it's already properly, encoded to and from like Elixir terms through, I don't know. Naming is going to be important there if that becomes a real thing. But that would be super cool though.
The technical work behind all of this is really impressive and incredible. And right now it's like you're still in that exploration phase of what's possible. What can we do? So if other people are listening to this and they're saying, oh, I have some ideas, I think I want to help out. Is there a way that they can get involved to help out with the actual project?
Yeah, definitely. Like there are a number of ways to communicate with us. Like there is a software mentioned Discord where we have like all our projects and different channels for them. You can reach out there. You can open up an issue on GitHub, open a discussion on GitHub, reach out to us on Twitter, wherever you will.
Awesome. Well, Mateusz, it sounds like you've got a lot of interesting interesting stuff ahead. And some of those things are just, it's fun because that's like the real exploratory, wow, what can we make this do? Is this possible? And you've already accomplished quite a bit. It's a major feat to get where you've already gotten, being able to leverage the work that's already done with AtomVM. So it's like one of those things where I think it might take some time for people to get their head around what could I do with this and see the potential and the options that are in front of them now.
Yeah, that's the good part of the R&D. the bad part is that it may end up useless in the very end. But I hope it's not the case.
And I really do appreciate that Software Mansion is sponsoring that effort because it is just something that helps raise awareness in the Elixir community for other people outside of the community saying, wow, look what they can do in Elixir. And I think that's really neat. What can I do with that? And now I have an easy way to play with Elixir and get an intro. I love anything that can grow the community.
Now that I have your attention, we are also organizing global Elixir meetups. Maybe you heard about this initiative, so it's happening very soon. If anyone is interested to take part in this initiative, both joining the meetup, speaking on a meetup, or organizing a meetup and registering it at globalelixirmeetups.com, we would be very pleased to have you.
Awesome. Yes, that's good. I'm glad you mentioned the Global Elixir Meetups, which also is a Software Mansion thing. So you guys are busy. Well, if people want to follow up or have questions or want to get involved, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So as I mentioned, there is a Software Mansion Discord. There are also all the Elixir channels like Elixir Forum, Elixir Slack. Please reach out there or via our GitHub repository. So these are the best options.
Well, Mateusz, thank you very much for joining with us and helping me understand better what Popcorn is and all of the work that's gone into it and what it could possibly become. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.